Thanks for joining us on 9 News Plus. I'm Chris Bionti. November is Native American Heritage Month, and we wanted to gain a better understanding for Native American culture. Specifically, we wanted to understand about the important role that maintaining Native American languages plays in keeping tribal culture intact. So, we spoke with a Native American language expert to find out how they plan to revitalize dying Native American languages and why doing so is so important.
It is obviously National Native American Heritage Month, and I wanted to kind of chat more in detail with you about that. And more specifically, what does National Native American Heritage Month mean to you specifically, Alex?
Well, for me personally, I celebrate my culture and heritage throughout the year, every day
Hmm.
of my life. So for me, it's more just a it's an opportunity to kind of raise awareness and educate the American public on some of the the history, the issues, the culture, the fact that we still exist. I think is one of the big things that people seem to misunderstand or be misinformed about, that we still exist, that we're modern people, we're a living culture, we're still here, and then also just the history, native history throughout different regions. So many people don't know even what tribe's land that they're on, and
Hmm.
so there's just so many areas of education that need to happen, and this is just one month where we can take kind of have some space to do that. Of course, there's always more that's needed, but um, grateful for this opportunity to highlight our people, our culture, our identities, and to educate those who are willing to listen and willing to learn.
What you said something really interesting to me there. You said that some of us may not know necessarily what land we're standing on or where we are. Is there a good map or a good resource for us to figure out exactly what land, what tribe's land we're standing on?
I have seen maps. I can't think of the publishers or where they'd be accessible, but I've seen maps hung up on the walls in certain schools and certain libraries and things. And definitely, like the fact that I couldn't tell you where to get those or where to access those, that's one more example of what more work that we need to do. So that's I'll try to do some research and get back to you with a link.
Yeah, for sure. And don't worry, I was kind of asking something that kind of popped up in my head as you were telling me about that because that's super interesting to me.
Yeah.
But more specifically, I do want to ask you about the fight to keep Native American languages specifically alive. And I know that's something that you specialize in, Alex. Can you tell me about that challenge? I know you're Lakota specifically, but what about the challenge to keep Native American languages alive from a broader perspective?
Yeah, certainly. So many of the obstacles and the factors that come into play into the decline of Lakota language being spoken in our communities is actually parallel to many of the experiences in other indigenous communities, not just in the U.S. but also Canada, also Mexico, also all the way throughout South America and to worldwide. Indigenous languages are at stake here, and in fact, I think the UN declared the entire decade the decade of indigenous languages. Um, and so some of those obstacles, are a lack of representation in media, a lack of resources, reading materials, a lack of TV shows, different modern things that take up space in our daily lives are not in the languages of our people. And so, you can just imagine that English becomes the standard, right? But also throughout history, there's been all sorts of other obstacles, some more purposeful than others. So one thing in common that we have in the U.S. Amongst various tribes, as well as tribes in Canada, is the boarding schools and residential schools, and that was an entire school system um, that removed Native children from their families. Beginning, I think the first Indian boarding school in the U.S. was in Pennsylvania, Carlisle Indian School, and this was in the late 1800s. And they would remove children from their families, from their homes, their communities, and they would have them attend these boarding schools where they would live there, and they were kind of stripped of their culture. Their hair, if they had long hair, that would be cut. Their traditional dress would be removed, and they would be given uniforms, and they would be forced to speak English. And many elders have stories about not being allowed to speak their languages at school. And even if they had classmates that spoke the same language, they'd be discouraged or even abused for speaking in front of their teachers. And so they were taught English, encouraged to speak English. And so you can only imagine the effects those had on generations throughout different various communities. And so that happened to Lakota communities as well as a lot of other tribes throughout the US and Canada. In addition to that, there's been all kinds of other divisive things that have divided our people from being able to communicate, whether it's reservations, having borders, because like I live on Pine Ridge Indian Reservation. If you go north of here, you could end up in Cheyenne River or Standing Rock. If you go east, you end up in Rosebud. And those are other reservations, and they all speak the same language as us. We're all Lakota. But having those divisions instead of having one big territory, which according to the 1868 treaty was a big territory where we would all be within the same territory. So just like little divisive things like that kind of deteriorate the language speaking community. So all these things throughout history, and like I said, in modern times, it's especially tough with media, and these types of things make it hard for indigenous languages to kind of thrive and survive within present day society, American society.
So what are you doing? You're part of the Lakota Language Consortium. Tell me about what you're doing to try and keep them alive.
Yeah, so the nonprofit organization, Lakota Language Consortium, the deputy director for, we are constantly trying to come up with more ways to teach, to create materials for language teachers that are in schools, to create materials for families that want to revitalize the language or continue speaking the language in their homes. So some of the projects, one of the biggest things I think is a dictionary. And our dictionary is a living document, so we're always adding on to it. Languages have to be alive. They have to evolve in order to continue on. And so we're about to publish our 3rd edition dictionary. I'm working on a podcast, visiting with some of the elders that are still around that speak our language fluently, so that their stories and we can hear their language passed on. We've done textbooks for teachers and schools. We dubbed the Lakota, or we dubbed the Berenstain Bears in the Lakota language. So that's a cartoon series that people can access on YouTube, and you can hear Lakota language spoken through that. So these are just a few examples, but there's a lot of work to be done. But that's what we're just trying to encourage people to speak, to learn, to teach, and to continue with keeping our language alive, and create, kind of increasing the access to the language, because there's only a few speakers in each community, and oftentimes they don't get together. And of course, and the language is supposed to bring us together, right? We have to be together to use it. If one person knows the language, they have no one to talk to, and that does no one any good. So just trying to bring people together over the language. Yep.
For sure. And what sort of interest are you getting from some of the younger generations to learn Lakota and other Native American languages?
Well, that's also another struggle. Sometimes we've had young people, I've had students say, how is this going to help me, or why do I need to know this? But we show them ways that it can be applied in the modern world. How can we be Lakota and speak Lakota in today's world in 2022? And by showing them that, I think that opens their eyes. It awakens a sense of pride in them as a Lakota, and shows them. I think that one of the biggest things is to show that it's learnable, that it is possible to learn the language even if you didn't grow up speaking it. And we have a number of rather successful second language learners who are Lakota. I didn't grow up speaking the language. I grew up singing songs in the language and knowing a lot of vocabulary words here and there, but I wasn't conversational at all. And so I took that on as an adult, and I try to encourage others to as well. And I have a lot of mentors, a handful of mentors that did as well, and some of them you would never even tell. You'd think that they're completely fluent.
Uh, Sorry if this may be a bit of an abstract question. Is there an interest in non-Lakota, non-Native Americans to learn some of these languages?
Yeah, we've seen some non-Lakota people, non-native people take an interest in learning the language. And I welcome it. I think language is to be shared. Language is to bring people together, to bridge the gaps in cultural differences and to encourage cultural diversity. So I welcome it. Of course, I first and foremost want to see the language thrive and be alive and well within our communities. But I think that we need allies to help with that too. We have non-Lakota people that live in our communities, teach in our communities, that work here, and we need them on board.
How at threat would the Lakota? How few speakers are there in some of these communities? I know you specifically know about the Lakota community, but if younger people or other people don't learn these languages, how close are you potentially to losing some of these languages and the culture that comes with it?
Well, there are some tribes, especially on the East Coast, that that they have no speakers left, and
Hmm.
so the term that they use for the status of their language is sleeping. And so there are people that are working within those tribes to bring back their language, to revitalize their language that is currently sleeping. And so that they're relying on, hopefully they have recordings. That's probably the most valuable resource for them if they have those. And then if not, they might have texts, they might have documents, old treaties, different things that they can use to kind of piece back together and create a dictionary of some sort and kind of work to try to bring that language back. Another thing is that we have kind of like with any other languages throughout the world, there are language families. So there are languages that are kind of related. There might be a similar language or the same language but different dialects or different things like that. So with proper linguistic training, they can visit with neighboring tribes that have a similar language and kind of put piece back the puzzle back together. But that's a extremely unfortunate reality that they're facing. But they have the resiliency to continue doing that work, and more power to them. um, and I get inspiration from them because we still have a handful of speakers throughout Lakota communities, and so it kind of makes me the more and more grateful for them. And so that's what part of the reason why we're trying to pursue a podcast project and trying to preserve and document as much language as we can from them while they're still here.
For sure. Any final thoughts about the battle or the fight to keep some of these languages alive and how it impacts the Lakota as well as other Native American communities?
Yeah. Well, I said it in we recently just had a Denver language weekend down there, and I got to visit with somebody from NBC there, and I told them that within Lakota culture, and I think this probably applies to other cultures as well. The language provides insight, and it provides that it's the essence of the identity and the worldview, and so we need to ensure that continues on. We've fought erasure for centuries, and we're still here, but we need to do all we can to keep our language alive, to keep that essence of the culture alive as well.
No doubt about that. And Alex FireThunder, Deputy Director of the Lakota Language Consortium, thank you so much for joining us and lending us such valuable and fascinating insight to this. And we certainly wish you the best of luck moving forward on this.
Thank you. I'll say it in Lakota. Wopila echichielo.
Wopili Achichilo, is that right?
It says that I say a thank you to each and every one of you.
Oh, that's fascinating. Well, that's Wopili Achichilo, is that right?
Wopila, or I guess to each and every one of you would be Wopila echichiapalo. Wopila echichiapalo.
Wopila Achichiapalo.
Moshte, perfect. Moshte.
Mushta. Nailed it. Well, thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you again, Alex. And fascinating, and appreciate a few minutes of your time here.
Yeah, thank you.